just so festive. That shell does not make the cut. I get to use my very favourite tool in the kitchen. The bottom is always uglier than the top. It's nearly there. Exciting. Absolute chef's treat. Such a cute Christmas gift. Hello and welcome to the magically festive Good Housekeeping kitchen. I'm Maker and I rhyme with baker, easiest way to remember. I'm the Good Housekeeping cookery director and I'm really excited to make for you some frosted sugar cookie wreaths. Not only are they delicious, but they're wonderful to give as little Christmas presents. So let's get baking. Sugar cookies are not the same as shortbreads. Shortbread classically needs only 3 ingredients: a fat, flour and sugar. With a sugar cookie you chuck in more easily flavourings. You usually got a baking powder in there to get that nice snap. That's what we're after. Let's talk about gadgets. This thing of beauty here is the KitchenAid stand mixer. It's the only one I use. It's the one the cookery team use on all our shoots in all our testing. And it was tested by the Good Housekeeping Institute. Rigorous, stringent testing, and it scored a ginormous 96 out of 100. So if it's good enough for them, it's the only thing we'll use. In goes our unsalted butter, nice and soft at room temperature. You should be able to squish your finger through it, and caster sugar. And we want to beat these two together until they're really soft and creamy. And I know a lot of recipes say that, but you need it to be fluffy and light. Not only are you beating air into the mixture, but you're also dissolving the sugar. So beat until light and fluffy. During this process, I really recommend that you scrape down the sides because tons of it gets stuck up the sides and that butter won't combine properly. It'll just remain stuck. Get a good stiff spatula. Get in there. And back we go. Okay, enough of that. On to the next phase, our flavourings. Now you can flavour this dough with quite a few things. You could go with a peppermint extract or any zest that you fancy, clementine, lime. We're going with a very festive and seasonally appropriate clementine and a bit of vanilla. Vanilla in a biscuit is always wonderful. So let's get those in. Teaspoon of vanilla. I might be using a spoon now, but you'd normally catch me using the lid at home. And then we're going to get in 1 medium egg white. That shell does not make the cut. There we go. And finally and happily, I get to use my very favourite tool in the kitchen, a microplane, which was actually developed by a lady who used to go and steal her husband's woodworking tools, as she found that gave the best, very fine scraping of peel without getting the bitter white pith underneath. So the recipe calls for 1 clementine or half a large orange. And now I know I'm going to get commentary about how I zest. My team always laughs that I zest upside down. But it makes sense. It gathers the zest in the top of the zester and then you pop it in afterwards. This is truly one of my favourite kitchen jobs, zesting with a microplane. The smell and the end result are just lovely. And then beat it again until nice and combined. I know it sounds boring, but do scrape down their sides again. You want everything really properly amalgamated. Don't worry at this stage if the mixture is a little bit curdled. We're only adding an egg white into it because we want the crispness that an egg white gives you rather than the richness that an egg yolk does. And now we get in our flour. plain flour, baking powder. It might be odd to add baking powder to a recipe, but actually it allows the biscuit to rise quickly in the oven and then settle, and it really helps with that snap that we're after for a sugar cookie. And don't forget a pinch of fine salt. It really helps brings out flavors. And then we're going to beat just until combined. Don't carry on going too long or the gluten will work out in the flour, which will make the end biscuit tough. So just until the dough starts clumping together. Let's work it out of the whisk, and then we're going to bring the dough together. And then give it a couple of stirs in the bowl to make sure you've got all that base flour. And then off the spatula. Before I forget, rings off. As much as I love a sugar cookie, I don't want it coating those. And then get the dough out on the surface. We're going to prepare it for a nice chill, because as with most biscuit recipes, this stage is super important to stop gluten developing, help it relax. Gluten is a structure in the flour that when it's moved too much, it creates a structure, and that structure is great in breads, but bad in biscuits. So we want that to relax, and we want the butter to chill up, so it is as cold as possible before it hits the hot heat of the oven. So wrap it. I like to wrap in baking parchment unless it needs to be completely airtight, in which case cling film is the best option. But for doughs, baking parchment is lovely. A pleasing present, and ready to go into the fridge until it's nice and chilled. We asked our lovely readers on Instagram if they had any baking questions for me, specifically Christmas baking questions. And Elaide asked whether we have a fail-safe gingerbread house recipe. But of course we do. It's called our Winter Wonderland Gingerbread House. We have loads of them online, but this one is particularly great because it's a very simple recipe, has a wonderful video, and it's also very tasty to eat. You can follow the template, which is there. You can print out and cut out your gingerbread house, or you can get ambitious, architect your own. That's what I would do. Every year it's a different model. Every year it's a new house I want to live in, and get as many sweets on the roof as possible. But either way, delicious, and thank you for your question. Next, Anita asked, do we have a go-to mulled wine recipe? And we've got a fantastic page dedicated to the art of making mulled wine. It's called How to Make Mulled Wine. Videos, tips, the tricks, the lot to ensure a good glass. Our biscuit dough is nice and chilled. You can leave it for about 5 minutes if you want to allow it to soften slightly, or you can get straight in there. Unwrap your little present. I can already smell clementine, delicious. A good flouring of your surface. And on top of your dough a little bit. And don't forget to also dust your rolling pin. Really get over your dough and slowly start with a bit of downward pressure and twisting to make sure it's not sticking on the counter. And don't forget to turn it around, because the bottom is always uglier than the top, and then you can start smoothing it out. When you're rolling any dough, try not to go all the way along in one motion. It's far more efficient and actually handles the dough better if you do short, sharp strokes. You'll get a much more even end result. And make sure you keep rotating your dough. Just a quarter turn is enough to make sure it's not sticking. And that also helps you not to overwork that gluten, keeping the biscuits as tender and buttery as possible. Right, we're nearly there. 3 millimeters is what we're looking for, and that's a depth of 3 millimeters. Just run a palette knife underneath the dough to make sure you're loose everywhere. And now we get to the fun part of cutting. I've got a 7 centimeter round cutter, more or less, doesn't really matter. You can go with fluted or any shape. This biscuit dough really holds its shape well. So get festive, get some reindeers in there, gingerbread houses even, with a nice sugar cookie dough. Give it a little dust, and cut. And then onto sheets lined with baking parchment. You can space them fairly closely. They don't do much spreading. You want to try and work as quickly as you can to keep that dough chilled. It's much easier to stamp out neat circles when it's as cold as can be. Any trimmings you can just gather up and re-roll to make as many biscuits as you can get out of this lovely dough. So reshape it into a ball, lightly flour again, and it doesn't suffer at all from 2 or 3 rollings. There'll barely be any blisters on your final baked biscuits, and you're going to cover them with icing anyway. So just use up every scrap of dough and make as many as you can get out of there. Now you can leave them like that, lovely sugar biscuit discs, or you can stamp out the middles like I'm going to do today, because I want to make festive wreaths. So grab yourself a smaller cutter, but they can be quite hard to come by. You want 2 to 2.5 centimetres, so I'm just using the end of a piping nozzle. Again, dip it in a bit of flour and pop them out. So satisfying. Absolute chef's treat. All our sugar cookie wreaths are stamped out and ready. Don't be tempted to put them straight in the oven at this stage because they will sag, they'll lose their shape. You want them as firm as possible just before they hit that hot oven to ensure they stay crisp and ensure they hold their shape. So into the fridge they go for at least 20 minutes. Right, they've had their absolute requisite chill and now they're going to go into a 180 oven, 160 if it's fan assisted, for 12 to 14 minutes. It's not a long bake, you're just looking for them to get a little bit golden around the edges. So we're on to the icing of our sugar cookie wreaths, and you could absolutely leave them plain if you prefer. They'll last really well plain, and I'm talking at least a good 2 months in an airtight container. But we're going to make a nice glacé icing, which is a basic icing sugar and water mixture. But you can use the zest of your clementine if you prefer. But I wanted to keep it nice and white, which opens up more options for delightful festive sugar sprinkles. Don't be tempted to not sift your icing sugar because you'll never be able to beat out those lumps. And now, just enough water to get it to a thick, spreadable consistency. It's nearly there. The bowl noise is irritating me massively, so I'm going to put a little cloth underneath it to stop it moving. Festive cloth, of course. And now, less noise, more festive peace, and I can get on with making my icing properly. And we're there. You see it's reluctantly coming off my whisk, but the thicker you can get it while still spreading it on your biscuit, the faster it will dry and the less moisture it will bed down into the biscuit, keeping it as crisp for as long as possible. Biscuits are baked and smelling incredible. That clementine zest, yum! Now, they're a little bit delicate when they come out the oven, so handle with care. My fingers, on the other hand, are used to a lot of heat, so don't worry about them. Leave them on a wire rack until they're completely room temperature. And the final one. So just let your cookies cool completely to room temperature before you ice. If you try and put glacé icing on a warm biscuit, it will ooze and melt. We've reached the calm after the baking storm. Our biscuits are cool at room temperature, unlike my tea, piping hot and ready for the next activities. And we're going to ice. This is a great stage to get the kids involved, if you don't mind the mess. Or you can set yourself up with a lovely small palette knife, incidentally one of my favourite tools in the kitchen, a selection of sprinkles, and I dare say I have many in my house, all lovely and organised, and get icing those wreaths. And enjoy the moment, because it's not a task, it's actually a joy to be able to do this. So gently smooth over and sprinkle as soon as you're done. Don't worry about it being a little bit messy. Our icing is stiff, and that's for a reason, to prevent too much moisture hitting the biscuit. It will self-settle and look wonderfully smooth in about 30 seconds. Sprinkle over a tray or a plate to capture the excess. Oh, just so festive. And carry on going. Unsurprisingly, I don't actually get given many foodie gifts. I'd love them, but people think I'll be judgmental. I'm not. I really eat everything. But I would say if you're planning on giving gifts, I know it sounds a bit draconian, but if you're planning on giving food gifts, do think about when you're going to give them, because nobody needs 13 bags of fudge just before Christmas. If you want to give a Christmas cake, give it a good 3 weeks before, and that's an early Christmas present, and people will enjoy it far more than building up too much excess and wasting. And I do love a useful food gadget. A Mexican elbow citrus press, yes please. A lovely little spatula, also here for it. And a very good stiff spatula spoon, all brilliant gadgets, and they will last you for years. My favourite Christmas biscuit is probably a vanilla kipfel. It's not very patriotic because I'm Dutch and these are German or Austrian, but they are amazingly nutty half-moon crescents flavoured with vanilla and doused in icing sugar, and they crumble in your mouth and are just so good with a hot cup of tea. Yes, I love hot cups of tea. The sugar cookie wreaths are iced and they're dried. It takes a good 5 hours for that glacé icing, even though we made it really thick, to dry. And if you try and stack them before that, the icing is going to crinkle and they're going to stick together. So give it the time. Finish with a edible spritz of luster dust for that Christmassy glow, and then store them to eat and enjoy. Pack them into a nice tin as a lovely present, or give in a nice cellophane bag. Absolutely dreamy. Such a cute Christmas gift. And I hope you enjoy these. They are really nice to get ahead on. Uniced, the biscuits keep for a month or so. Once they're iced, they keep really well in a tin as well. And they make great presents. The most exciting part of Christmas for me is Christmas morning. I'm sure that's not rare. I'm sure that's for most people. For us in our family is all about mashed potato donuts. The mashed potato in the dough helps create air, makes for super fluffy donuts, utterly delicious, coated in a cinnamon sugar. And invariably there's a competition to see who can eat the most of the kids. My nephew ate 7 one year, is all I'm saying. Very delicious. And of course, a festive hot chocolate with a bit of booze thrown in there for adults, with no booze for the kids, obviously, and absolutely decorated with my drawer of festive sugar sprinkles for good measure. The joy of a sugar cookie is a proper snap, and you know that's going to taste good. And if you have been tempted to make these amazing sugar cookie wreaths, and why wouldn't you be, head to the Good Housekeeping website for the full recipe. I really hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have enjoyed making these sugar cookie wreaths, and I wish you all a very Merry Christmas.